The story begins with a hunter entering a bar and saying that he has just completed the level 2 mission along with the newbies, and now he will finally be able to see the hero's trial. So a few minutes later the voting was closed, with 325 votes in favor and 0 votes against, and that means that the hero's deprivation was approved. At the same time, the Speaker of Parliament said that there is a lot of evidence that the Prota committed several massacres during the war. He also attacked friendly people from the other world, and destroyed the friendly relationship agreement between the two worlds. And in view of all these crimes, the High Council will sentence him to death, but due to his service to humanity in expelling those who invaded this world, they will not sentence him to death, but Parliament will deprive him of some identities, as the leader of the state, and many others. But still they will keep his title of Special Hero, and as the only one Special Hero of this state, in case something happens in the future, he must return to the battlefield unconditionally, be immediately integrated into a unit, and hearing this, people split into 2 parts. One stood beside the hero, who had already saved this world several times, and the other part was against him, wanting him to be condemned. So President said that the Prota can leave keeping his honor of being a special hero, since humanity will never forget the credits he gave deserves for fighting the monsters, and due to their previous crimes, that's the most they can do. At the same time, the scene focuses on the protagonist getting confused with the situation in front of him, as his last memory was him being killed due to a sneak attack by the Lord of the Rippling Night, but for some reason, now he is in the place where he was judged and betrayed by his comrades, and while he thought that this was memories of his life, a window into the system appeared out of nowhere in front of him, saying that the main mission to rebuild humanity has been completed. Because of that, he has 2 new options to choose from. The first is the hero path, and the second is the monstrous path, where a new crisis has arisen, and dumb humans can't understand his actions, but now saving humanity has nothing to do with him, and once he's finished making his choice, he'll be randomly transported to an F-level dungeon. Of course, after betrayed by humans in his past life, he didn't even think twice, and chose to become a monster. And seeing the protagonist in silence, the president admitted in his thoughts that he is an incomparable hero in this world, but as a leader, the Prota has no political knowledge, and in a few years, the state will have already ruined his prestige in the eyes of society, leaving him as the special hero of the past who led humanity out of the darkness, so he will become Elisha from the ancient era, and this exposure of him to the public, and just to make him a harmless statue. And if he dares not agree to the terms, he will be viewed in an even more negative light by the public. And while they wait, see the Prota making a lot of noise for not wanting to give up his authority, the Prota gave up something they didn't expect, and that was his special hero title. The protagonist even said that he's tired of this hero talk, and when playing this title off, he felt much more relaxed. Of course, this was not something the president wanted, as his plan is going to waste. Because of that, he asked the protagonist to give up his level 13 power as well. At the same time, an extra explains that besides the Prota, no one has reached a level higher than 10. Because of that, the president didn't want to see such a strong person without a collar, so he invented a lot of excuses to make the hero give up his power, and how the Prota had chosen to follow the path of becoming a monster. He gave up his power as a hero, and as his power was too great, several people in the same room as his fainted, and only the president, who was level 9, managed to remain conscious. While use all his power, and with such great power being poured into the sky, people thought a god had descended to earth, so a few minutes later it shows the president forming a plan to kill the Prota when he leaves this room, since now he's just an ordinary human. But when the hero went through the door, out of nowhere he disappeared, and seeing that the president didn't know what was happening, and the reason he disappeared was because the system had said that he would be teleporting to a random dungeon, thus beginning the journey of the hero who was betrayed by humanity to become the most appealing monster in the world. So it cuts to another scene, where it shows a group of adventurers entering a level 3 dungeon, and to our delight this team had 2 waifus. At the same time it was revealed that they managed to enter this dungeon, thanks to the judgment of hero number 1. As several hunters chose to watch the trial live. Then when they were getting ready to start the mission, Out of nowhere, the protagonist who had disappeared from the trial appeared in front of them. Of course, as he wasn't wearing his registered mask, the adventurers didn't recognize him, and started to belittle him for being in a dungeon alone and without equipment. But unlike their thoughts, the Prota was fine, since walking in this low-level dungeon was like walking in his garden. So there's no way he can compare this low-level dungeon with the dungeon he cleaned, where humans were unable to survive and even monsters were afraid of that place, because of the bosses of that dungeon who were all nameless demon gods. At the same time, the Prota explains that after he lost all his hero power, he went back to level 1, and the system decided to send him to that place. But he doesn't regret his choice, as the hero's path was not able to save humanity. And because of that he chose the path of becoming a monster, and disturbing his thoughts. The leader of the adventurers asked what level the Prota was on, and for the captain of the hunters this boy in front of him should be on the same level as the Prota. Of him, level 3, since he entered this dungeon alone, but totally different from what he thought. The Prota said he was level 1. Of course the extras started to think that the Prota was a lunatic, so the leader of the hunters said that since he wants to die so bad, they won't stop him, but if he gets in danger, they won't help him. Later shows the adventurers easily defeating the monsters, and seeing that the Prota decided not to intervene. At the same time, one of the girls from this group of adventurers appeared by his side, and apologized for his leader not being friendly, and also warned him to be careful, because even though your captain had spoken like that, your boss was just wishing that a rookie like him didn't die in vain. But the Prota didn't care about her warning, and was a little surprised that the current hunters had his teamwork improved compared to before, and seeing him talking like an old man, the girl found it strange as he seemed quite young, and explained that the reason the current adventurers have improved was because of the reinforcement policy of the formation of the hunters. That hero number 1, the fake mask, started, and thanks to him, the death rate of adventurers has dropped, and as a result, humanity has excellent hunters now. And finishing her explanation, the girl she sat down, saying her name is Yen Qian, a level 2 healer. So later while they were talking, out of nowhere the Prota pulled her by the hand, and made Ghost Spider that had attacked the girl miss the blow, and getting annoyed with her prey dodging, the spider attacked again, but the Prota grabbed one of its paws, and ripped it off with a single hand, and using that paw with a weapon, he crushed the spider's head. And seeing the Prota defeat this monster so easily, the extras were shocked, and finish off the spider, the Prota asked the girl to release him, and embarrassed she ended up apologizing, and seeing his status rising with the spider's death, the Prota realized that with this new system and his combat experience, it wouldn't take long for him to surpass the level of power he had when he was a hero. At the same time, the leader of the hunters apologized to the Prota for having looked down on him, and thanked him for saving his mate, and Prota said he doesn't need to thank. Helping each other is common. Of course, he said that on purpose to touch the wound of the extra. Then, when they were almost arriving at the boss's lair, the leader of the group created a plan so stupid that even a 6-year-old child who plays Free Fire would make a better plan. And after finishing preparing, they had a few minutes of rest, and they started to speak ill of the number 1 hero, saying that even if he is the savior of the world, he should be condemned for massacring an entire city. And of them all, the only one who sided with the fake mask was Yen Qian. She said that he heard that that city had an infection from a demon that descended into the earth, and the whole city was infected and ended up turning into monsters. And like all good extras, the arrogant hunter started to make fun of her, so after interrupting after their discussion, the group leader led them to the boss room, and when they got there, they started thinking about the money they would earn by defeating the boss, and didn't worry about their enemy's strength level. At the same time, a giant spider appears and seeing her, the captain started his grand plan to attract the monster's attention for them to attack, and since low-level beasts aren't smart, their super plan was working, as all it takes is a good job as a team to defeat such a monster. So doing a good job as a team, they managed to defeat the level 3 beast easily. And as they prepared to distribute the reward according to everyone's contribution, the Prota found it strange that they thought that this is a level 3 dungeon, as the system had warned that this is a level 4 dungeon. At the same time, a scary aura started to leak towards them, and from inside the cave a girl appeared. And for some reason strange, she was wearing an astronaut helmet, thus connecting all the dots. They realized that this girl was the real boss. Of course, even in this situation, he thought this girl was weaker than the other spiders. And seeing her running towards him, he was not worried and attacked her with a simple swing of his sword, and to everyone's surprise he managed to hit the monster. And while he was all confident thinking he defeated the boss alone, the girl ghost broke his arms using her web, and seeing that, the adventurer's leader formulated a new plan, where the sorceress used her fire magic to burn the boss and his webs. But that plan didn't work, and the demonic girl stayed even stronger, and used one of his paws to cross the arrogant extra's chest, and seeing his companion dying in front of him, the archer lost his cool. But before he went over the monster, the Proto stopped him, and said he didn't lose his cool in a battle, and as the dungeon portal was going to take 3 hours to open, they had no choice but to defend themselves while retreating. But that plan didn't work either, and the archer ended up being captured by the webs from the arena, and had his head swallowed by the beast. And seeing one more of his companions slamming his boot in front of him, the leader also lost his cool, and used all his level 3 hunter power to burn the spider to death. But to his despair, the monster did not receive a single scratch, so when he was about to be devoured by the beast, the Proto ordered him to hand over his sword. If he is willing to sacrifice one of his arms in order to survive. Upon hearing this, the captain was terrified. But as this was the only way for him to survive, he threw the sword to the Proto, and taking the sword, he cut the arm of the leader of the adventurers, and took advantage of the monster was devouring its new meal. He saved the captain. At the same time, Yan Qian used her healing magic to heal her companion's arm, and seeing this desperate situation, the mage ran away and left her friends behind. And when wondering if he wasn't going to run away too, the Proto replied that there is no way run away. That monster is just pretending to let her escape, because when humans run away, they release fear, and that makes the beast happy, as these monsters chosen by the outer gods of the void love to eat humans' negative emotions. After being blessed by the gods, these beasts receive a frightening increase in strength and power. Of course, these monsters are no big deal to him as he has killed countless outer gods. And while thinking about that, out of nowhere the monster released a poisonous gas, and using her purification magic, Yan Qian managed to protect everyone who was around her. But as the mage was out of her reach, she ended up passing out, and after a few minutes Yan Qian ran out of mana and ended up passing out also. Of course, this poison had no effect on the Proto, so he took advantage that the poison gas had made everyone faint, and activated his monstrous state. And mocking the boss, he thanked him for making everyone else fainting him, since thanks to that, he will be able to fight seriously. And as a bonus he said that she should be proud to be the first to witness this transformation of him, and finishing saying that, shows the Proto in his monster form. So with a simple step, the Proto ripped off one of the spider's legs, and getting annoyed at losing one of its legs, she attacked him several times, but he easily dodged it with his great speed, and also ripped off almost all of her legs. And realizing the difference in their strength level, the spider tried to run away, but the Proto reached it easily, and played with it, just like it played with the lives of humans before devouring them. So with just one step, it crushed the spider's head, and having finished clearing the dungeon, several system windows popped up, and the survivors were automatically transported out of the dungeon, just like that 2 hours later. It shows Yan Qian saying that after she woke up from the butt caused by the spiritual pressure, they were all out of the dungeon, and the captain who was seriously injured was rushed to the hospital, but she and the mage quickly left the hospital, as they were not injured, but she had not yet found the Proto, so she was worried about him, and while thinking about it, Yan Qian ended up seeing the protagonist. Yan Qian came by, and greeted him, but as the Proto was not good at carving name, he ended up not remembering her name. Because of that she got a little irritated, and introduced herself again, but when she saw that he was not hurt her anger passed, and she decided to guide him in this city, since it was his first time in this neighborhood. So after taking a walk around the city, they arrived at the Yan Qian's house. At the same time she said her house has separate rooms so he can stay there. At the same time the girl explains that this emblem in front of her house is the medal her father received when he retired. Her father kept saying that he has fought side by side with the fake mask hero, but she can't believe it, since there is no way for the number one hero to eat next to a low-level soldier, and due to the long wars, his father ended up receiving several injuries, and because of these injuries, he died shortly after retiring. Yanqian also spoke that her mother died before her father when she gave birth to her sister, and realizing that the atmosphere had become heavy, she said that he needn't worry, because it's been a long time since that happened. So after getting to know his new room, the Prota said that after completing a few more dungeons, he'll be able to get the money he needs to pay the rent, so he'll be able to find another place to live. And while he was thinking about that, a girl with wheelchairs appeared, and seeing her, Yanqian introduced the Prota to her, saying that he is going to live with them for a few days, and being a sensible person. The girl said that she doesn't understand how her sister brings a stranger who has just met inside the house, and because of the arrogant way her little sister was acting, Yanqian apologized to the Prota, and said that her sister is angry today because of the judgment of her idol, the fake mask she's loved since when she was little. At the same time it cuts to another scene, where it shows the girl in a wheelchair, getting extremely annoyed to see several comments talking bad about the number one hero. So full of anger, she started to answer all the comments. And because of that she didn't want to have dinner, and while the Prota was having dinner, he ended up remembering the time he ate the meat of monsters on the battlefield. Back then he didn't care how smelly the food was, he still ate to keep going, surviving in order to protect humanity. And as he thought about it, he heard the journalists saying that the number one hero ran away instead of paying for his crimes. And his claim to give up all his power as a hero was a lie, because he hasn't. Like a person without being able to suddenly disappear before the public eye, and even without his help, humanity will still be able to walk to glory, since it was the government that made him so strong, so they can create many heroes with the level of strength. Of course the girl was outraged to hear this, and asked if the Prota believes that the number one hero is running away, and unlike her, the strongest monster in the universe, didn't care about the pile of shit they were saying. But before answering her question, they heard a group of delinquents wanting to break the gate of her house. Because of that the girl had no choice but to open the door, and said that no matter what they do, she won't sell her house. Of course that wasn't enough to convince the loan sharks, so they started threatening her, saying that they have a good relationship with the government. Because of that it's easy for them to do anything without being punished, but as they are benevolent, they will give her and her sister 5 days to accept their offer, and if after 5 days, they are still not willing to cooperate, things are going to get complicated for them. And as he said that, he noticed the presence of the Prota inside the house, and thought he was Yanqian's boyfriend. Because of that he pretended to greet the Prota, and used his mental attack skill, and managed to enter his mental world, and like every good extra, he decided to make a person he saw for the first time to pass out and be in a coma for half a month. But even after flying for a while, the lone shark was shocked to find a human with a mental power as deep as an ocean. And realizing that he messed with the wrong person, he tried to run away from that place, but suddenly a gigantic wave engulfed him, and while he was drowning in that great mental power, the lone shark ended up seeing a monstrous being at the bottom of the ocean, and ended up fainting from fear. And seeing what happened to his boss, the extra tried to attack the Prota, but was stopped by his companion, who was the intellectual of the group, who realized that the Prota was stronger than them. Because of that he decided to retreat, but before leaving, he said that it's not over yet. At the same time the girl explained that these loan sharks have been bothering them for 4 years now. It started not long after her father's death, but when she became a level 2 professional, and joined the captain's team, they don't dare to cause trouble. But with the death of their team, and the captain being critically injured, they got on her nerves again. Afterwards, while washing the dishes, the girl thanked the Prota for helping her, and said that when she finds a new reliable group of hunters, she will recommend the Prota to them. Of course the betrayed hero knew the moment he gave it the first step on the path of darkness. He already knew that no one would be able to fight by his side, and as he thought about it, the status window appeared in front of him, and gave him the mission to clear a level 4 dungeon. The Prota entering the dungeon using the teleportation system, and with this power he can enter any dungeon without government permission. At the same time, while walking through the dungeon, 2 stone gargoyles came to life and attacked him, but before touching him in it, the Prota turned into a monster, and grabbed the 2 demons by the neck, and rip their heads off, then when entering a room that had dozens of stone gargoyles, he called all of them at once for fight, and annoyed us with his arrogance. They all attacked him at the same time, but using his great speed, the Prota dodged her blows, and crushed the head of a gargoyle with his hand, and the head of another with a kick. Just like that, after one time, the Prota broke the last gargoyle in half with his hands. At the same time the leader of the stone statues appeared, and seeing him, the Prota was excited about his battle against his new opponent, so without wasting time, he went to on top of the monster. So a few hours later, it shows a group of hunters entering the final boss room, and being shocked by the destruction in front of them, and also with the fact that even though they were the first group to enter this dungeon that appeared there 12 hours ago, the dungeon was already finished, and in this bizarre situation, they couldn't understand what was happening, and to increase their confusion even more, they saw the boss nailed to the wall with his own spear. In the previous part, after scaring the lone sharks, the protagonist cleared a level 5 dungeon by himself. Then a while later shows the dungeon inspection group, getting pissed at not being able to find out who was the wretch who skipped his inspection, and cleaned a new dungeon without registering. Of course among them there were also those who were fined for not needing to increase their work even more. But the head of the organization thought differently from them, since on a smaller scale, the fact that the dungeon had been cleaned by an unknown, it means that there is someone helping some hunters to secretly enter the dungeons. But on a larger scale, your Federation's security will be threatened, so if that person just wants to destroy the monsters, that wouldn't be a big problem. But if he just started ambushing the inspection teams inside the dungeon, that would be a big problem. As at the time his Federation was created, the biggest cause of death in the dungeons wasn't due to because of the monsters, but because of the blades of other humans. The boss also said that after the Gargoyles dungeon was cleared by an unknown, 6 other dungeons were also cleared, so that means the invader has enough power to be at peak level 5 as he cleared 7 dungeons by himself, and after clearing so many, it would be impossible for him to use all the treasures he gained, simplifying they should keep an eye on the city market, to get any clue of the invader. So it cuts to another scene where it shows the Prota in the town market, getting paid for the things he sold, and from the merchant's eyes, the Prota noticed that he accidentally sold something cheap again. But he didn't care about that, since the dungeon materials are of little use to him. The most important thing for him is to keep completing the system missions, to become more and more overpowered, and while thinking about that, he saw Yin Qian trying to increase the price of items she was selling, but no matter what she said about the sword, the merchant didn't change her price, and upon hearing the helper calling the katana her father left behind for scrap, she was very sad, and decided to take it. The merchant's offer, since she needed the money for her sister's medical expenses. Of course this merchant was a charlatan who was trying to trick the girl. He said that just so he could buy this sword made with a rare material for a price below. But before she made the biggest mistake of her life, the Prota stopped her, and analyzed the katana, and saw that it was a special level 5 sword, which had the material used in it stained by the blood of the demon god in the past. Because of that he decided to buy the katana. Of course there was no way the merchant could keep quiet in such a situation, but when he saw the Prota giving a large sum of money to the girl, he ended up giving up. After explaining to the girl that this sword had a secret that made it worth all the money he spent, the mind said that despite being curious, she won't ask anything, just like she did when he left the dungeon before her team, and got so much money in such a short time. The only thing she asks of him is that he be kind to her father's katana. At the same time the girl explained that her father died in that big ghost accident, where a level 10 monster came out of the dungeon and wreaked havoc on the entire city, and the scariest and deadliest thing about that monster was the deadly radiation it gave off, as this radiation made any ordinary person turn to puddles of flesh, and how their sister was touched by radiation, and ended up losing the movement of her legs, and for an extremely talented girl with swords, she felt that her world had ended, and because of the big ghosts, she now needs to receive regular treatments. If not, radiation will not spread and she will eventually die. So to take care of her sister, Yen Qian gave up her swordsman career and became a healer, as this was the class that has the highest survival rate. And hearing this, the Prota was surprised that such a weak monster, who died with just one punch from him, had such a profound impact on the lives of ordinary people. Then, while walking back to his house, the Prota ended up passing close to the inspection group of daimyos, who was looking for clues about the invader. At the same time, cuts to another scene where it shows the loan sharks breaking into the girl's house, and seeing these trash invading her house, the wheelchair mine attacked the extras with her sword of wood, but the loan shark dodged it without any difficulty, and missing his target, the girl ended up falling to the ground, and without missing this opportunity, the bastard began to humiliate her for not being able to stand up, and sent his men to look for the Prota, already what? He came to avenge his companion, but after searching for a while, they found nothing, so the leader of the loan sharks told his companion to throw a truck full of garbage in the backyard of this house when the Prota appears. So later, when the girl returned home, she was faced with a desperate situation, with her house destroyed and her sister injured. So full of concern, she took care of her sister's wounds, and asked the Prota to take care of her little sister until she was done to clean the yard. But before even starting to clean, a garbage truck broke the wall of her house and dumped all the garbage on top of it, and seeing this, the mine tried to comfort her sister, but the Prota stopped her, and said that if she goes now, it will only make her sister feel even sadder, and while she was outraged at the injustice of this world, the Prota said that he has no interest in the problems and injustices that the two of them are suffering, as he must spend his energy on something more important. But as he is bored, he decided to destroy the Lone Shark organization, and even the girl says if he goes there, he will die, as they have a lot of level 3 warriors. And 4, and their chief reached the level L5, this only made the universe's strongest monster's bloodlust increase, so without wasting time he arrived in front of the Lone Shark organization building. On another normal working day, the guards saw a strange guy entering the building with a sword in his hand, but this kind of thing was common for them, as there was always a troublemaker to cause trouble, so they went to kick the troublemaker out, as they always did, but for having chosen that instead of running away, they will regret it forever in hell, since before touching the Prota, they were cut several times without realizing it, and when passing by them, the guards ended up shattering into pieces. At the same time, he won a quest called Sacrifice to the Blood Sword, where he will have to feed his katana with human blood, and while waiting for his new sacrifice, reinforcements appeared and attacked the Prota, but he dodged it easily and cut off the heads of 2 of them, and put fear in the other with a single look, so after killing the 5th extra his blade ended up getting stuck, and without missing that chance the guard attacked him, but he dropped his sword, Ada, and killed the extra with a punch, and taking his sword, he went towards the head of the organization. At the same time shows the bastard making plans to make the sisters' lives even more miserable, but out of nowhere one of the employees appeared saying that there's a psychopath passing the cereal on everyone. Of course, as it was just one person, they weren't worried, since they don't mess with strong hunters or people with great influence. Simplifying, they only get in trouble with the poor, so without any worries they grabbed their weapons and went to see what was going on. And when they went down the stairs, they saw one of their staff being cut by the Prota's katana. But that wasn't enough to make them scared, as they are all level 4, so they drew their weapons, and seeing the Prota's appearance better, one of the guards told his boss that he was the one who defended the sisters, and as our Prota was no fool, he decided not to fight 3 level 4 hunters with his human form, so he destroyed the light extinguisher, and even though it was in the dark, the hunter who uses weapons was not worried, since he could see in the dark, but when he activated his night vision, he finally saw a terrifying monster in front of him. And while he was terrified, he tried to understand what was happening, but he didn't have time to think, as the demon disappeared out of nowhere in front of him, and before he managed to pull the trigger, a katana pierced his heart, and that way another extra went from base. At the same time, the chief of the Lone Sharks felt a strong smell of blood. Because of that, he was worried about his companion who had night vision, since he hadn't said anything for a few seconds, and with as it was all dark, the leader had no way of knowing if his companion was still alive, but thanks to the thunder that fell along with the rain, he saw a monster in front of him preparing to cut off his head, but before the blade reached his neck, he managed to defend the demon's attack with his axe, but if he had reacted a little slower his head would no longer be stuck on his neck. And thanks to the clarity that the thunder brought, The mage was also able to see the monster, so he used his ice magic to attack the demon. But the Prota didn't even look at the helper, and stopped the ice spear with one hand, and after shattering the ice magic with a simple handshake, the monster looked at the mage. At the same time the brightness disappeared, and the chief of the moneylenders heard the terrifying cry of his companion, and as he could see nothing, this made his fear increase still more, and suddenly another thunder fell from the sky, and thanks to that, he saw the monster holding his companion's head, and unlike before he managed to react in time to defend the attack, his fear made him unable to react. Because of that he had his head cut off, and while the katana was bathed in the blood of the level 4 hunters, the remaining guards were finally able to see the monster's appearance more clearly. But that sight would be the last thing they would see in life, so when the thunder's glare faded, and returned a second later, the demon was in the air, in front of the lone shark. At the same time everything went dark again, and they died without being able to react, and after finishing off the last guard, a level 6 hunter appeared, and was a little surprised that the demon in front of him didn't pass no sense of demonic madness. Because of this he began to think that the Prota was some hunter specializing in transformation, but he quickly discarded that idea, as no hunter would be able to transform into a demon with such a high degree of demonic breathing, so the only conclusion he came to was that this creature in front of him was between human and demon, and as it was the first time he had seen something like that, he decided to defeat this creature, and sell it on the black market to make up for all their losses the beast has caused, as those losses will make the guys above him angry. But if he captures this creature that would change, because they've been trying for a long time to merge humans with demons, so without wasting any more time, he used his great speed and attacked the demon, but the Prota managed to dodge just a little, and this blow broke a piece of his mask, and being surprised that he missed his blow, the level 6 hunter attacked several times to find out this creature's limit, so after hundreds of hits, he used his strongest attack to hit the monster's heart, but because of the creature's great reaction speed, he ended up missing his hit. But that was part of his plan. He only waited for an opening to draw his weapon, and shoots the monster point blank in the face, since in all his years of confrontations, he never missed this technique at least once. So while he thought he had destroyed the monster's head, he was shocked that the demon didn't suffer any scratches, but as he was a high-level hunter, he regained his calm quickly, and prepared to use his sword techniques. But no matter how much he waited, the monster didn't go after him, so he ended up realizing that the demon already knew his plan, and noticing his shock, the former hero said that this style of swordsmanship that the hunter is using was created by him, and he had put a rule that only righteous people could use this technique, but for some reason this garbage in front of him is using his ability. And hearing the creature say that he created this technique, the extra thought the monster I was delirious, since the one who created this art with the sword was the former number 1 hero, and seeing the hunter feeling no regrets for having destroyed several families, and thinking that the simple fact that he hunted demons, that already made him fair, the former hero was angry and decided to stop playing and activated the second phase of his transformation. In this way several claws appeared from his body in the style of the Spider-Man villain, Dr. Octopus, and using his claws the Prota attacked the extra, and even missing the first hit, he managed to hit his second attack, and after the first hit, all his claws also hit the helper, so when fixed on the wall, the hunter realized he would die. Because of that he asked full of outrage who was the Prota, but the strongest monster in the universe said that until now he hadn't hidden his identity, and at the same time he said that he cut off the extra's head, so his katana started to suck out all the blood around him, and with that the system window appeared, saying that the Bloody Crow's sword is an unlimited growth type weapon, which becomes stronger by absorbing the blood of beings overpower, and like the katana Prota's demonic weapon had just evolved, it unlocked a new skill, which made it fire a powerful blade of blood that is able to easily split the ground, and even though nothing changed in the sword's appearance, the Prota could vaguely feel something like a heartbeat coming from the katana. Guys, the Prota is a monster with unlimited growth, who has a demonic sword that also has unlimited growth, so you can tell he's going to get very overpowered. And while thinking about his hacks, the Prota noticed the presence of another guard, and seeing the monster noticing his presence, the extra begged for his life, but the former hero showed no mercy, and used the guard to test his new skill, and with a simple swing. With a sword a gigantic bloody aura was shot, and it went out cutting everything in front of it until it crossed the building, and under the building seeing this bloody aura was the government army, and after finishing surrounding the building, the old man got ready to try to persuade the attackers to surrender, so that they can find out what is happening inside, since invading now would only hurt the innocent. Of course the old man knows that not even 10% of the people in that building were innocent, but still thus, it is the function of your government to protect its citizens, but as they are causing a lot of damage, they will all be punished according to what they did. But unlike what the old man expected, it was not the lone sharks that left the building, and yes, a single man. At the same time it cuts to another scene where it shows the girl discovering that the former hero went to the organization using only a sword. Because of that, full of concern, she went after him, but in the middle of her way, she was stopped by a soldier of the city's defense, and he said that there is a very important investigation that needs her cooperation, and finishing saying that, he showed the protagonist's picture and asked if she knew him, and instead of answering the soldier's question, Yan Qian asked if the Proto was okay, and the army extra replied that this guy was the only survivor in the Lone Shark Building massacre, and the strange thing was that he was in perfect condition. After that it shows the protagonist in the private prison of the defensive army of the city, and seeing him quiet without wanting to open his mouth, the general was frustrated not to find out where he came from. The only thing they know is that this guy massacred the lone sharks, but as for his birth certificate, this is something that cannot be accessed. So in your view this guy looks like a ghost who has completely escaped government supervision, and according to the investigation his employee did, the general found that the Proto has some relationship with the woman named Yan Qian, so when they were about to interrogate this mine, they found out that the secret monitoring team personnel were also after her. The reason for their interest in her was that the secret team was looking for a mysterious thief who was able to enter the dungeons without registering. The army official also explained that they found out all the information about the girl's life, the most her father's story and also her younger sister's situation, and according to mine, she was exploring a dungeon with her team when she met the suspect who suddenly appeared, and her testimony matches those of the other survivors of the group of her hunters. So the only conclusion they could come to was that the Proto broke into the Lone Shark Company to kill everyone who was there without exception. And the reason for that was to get revenge for the fact that they were trying to steal the sisters' land. And while explaining this, Director Arthur of the secret monitoring team appeared, and went to interrogate the Proto, and seeing him, the employee explained that Commander Jiang is a level 7 hunter while Director Arthur is level 6, and the former world's strongest hero had level above 10. Because of that these two are known as the strongest in this city. At the same time when Commander Jiang entered the private prison, he noticed that the Proto was looking at him his medals. And for some reason he had a nostalgic look in his eyes, but putting his confusion over his gaze aside, the commander told the Proto that due to the crimes he committed, he will either be sentenced directly to death, or pay the equivalent value for his crime, enlisting in the expiation battalion and being sent to the front lines with the highest mortality rate. As long as he kills enough monsters, he can redeem his sins and return to the human world. Of course the general didn't tell the part that there is no possibility of returning alive from the battlefield. Most criminals died in the first battle, and none of them managed to return to society alive. Hearing this, the Proto didn't understand what was the punishment in that. So if he were to follow the old man's reasoning, no matter what he did, he would always have his sins forgiven, as he had spent his entire life on the battlefield. And seeing his reaction, the commander realized that the Proto had already fought on the battlefield. So after the old man it was Director Arthur's turn to interrogate the Proto, and in his first sentence he passed cloth for the protagonist without knowing it, saying that apart from him and the commander, only the former number 1 hero could establish the front line. And hearing this, the commander said that he won these medals under the command of the number 1 hero. At the same time, the director said that since the Proto had fought on the battlefield, he should have known that it is very difficult to keep the peace, so he shouldn't have massacred a company and also not entered the dungeons hidden, as this action of his will cost the lives of a very large number of professionals, and if he feels any guilt, he must confess his crimes, otherwise he will be transferred to the federal capital, and there the guys won't be nice. And while watching the old men leave, the Proto said that it would be interesting to go back to the federal capital to meet the people who stabbed him, pay them back, but with his current strength level that wouldn't be a good idea. While thinking about it, the system gave him a new mission, where the Proto had to destroy the Great Calamity, which was not completely eradicated in the past. And because of its infectious radiation in people's body, the Great Calamity will be reborn after several years. On reading this, the Proto was not surprised, as he knew that this would happen, because in his past life, not so long after his trial, the Great Calamity found an infected hunter as its host and was reborn, and in that he was eventually forced to be transferred to the front lines after the trial, and had to fight tirelessly to try to resolve this new crisis. And although the Great Calamity didn't have time to do much damage, as she died with just one punch from him, yet he was subjected to a lot of criticism from all over the world, and in this incredible wave of criticism, he was cancelled another year once, and was forced to apologize for not being ubiquitous and saving everyone's lives. But in this new life of his, he'll never care what others think. And he won't care whether people live or not die. And while looking at the Proto through the glass, the commander said that he has never seen a young man with such power on the front lines. But even though he is a great genius, he was able to defeat a level 6 hunter at such an age. Young man, he will not escape the judgment of Federation executives. After all, this is the Federation where even the former number 1 hero was tried. At the same time, cuts to another scene where it shows the federal government debating about the dungeon robber, and seeing the appearance of the Proto in the photo. The president who stabbed the number 1 hero in the back was a little surprised by the talent of a young man capable of killing a level 6 hunter, but one of the executives said that, even though this young man is a great genius, it must be run in public for the crime of tarnishing the reputation of the government. Of course, the executive who wanted this was the owner of the company of the loan sharks, but different from what he wanted, the president said he will send this young prisoner to the front line in the 1st Battalion of Atonement. On hearing this, the executive became desperate, since if he doesn't punish this young man, his lackeys won't be so obedient anymore. And why the president isn't caring about this case, and why his biggest goal currently is find some news about the fake mask's whereabouts. But no matter how much they search, they can't find any information about his whereabouts. And seeing him angry, the executives tried to calm him down, saying that the former hero no longer has his powers, so he doesn't pose any threat to them. But the president didn't agree with them, as he can't believe that a powerless person could disappear from the courthouse in a matter of seconds, but differs close to the president. The executives weren't worried, since even if the Proto tried to get revenge, he wouldn't be a threat, because until then there would be no more people on his side. It's clear to the president if the former hero didn't have under his control, he would always pose an unknown danger. Later, while listening to his employees' report, the president was irritated by the large increase in the number of monsters in the last month, and this increase was due to the disappearance of the betrayed hero. And because of this large increase, an executive said that maybe the punishment of the savior of the world was too harsh. It would be better if he remained the special hero, as he never interfered in the Federation's actions. On hearing this, the president got pissed, and said that his Federation doesn't need the Proto to survive. Of course, the execs weren't worried about that, they just cared about making as much profit as possible. At the same time, it cuts to another scene where it shows the 2 sisters leaving the City Defense Army building after being interrogated, and on hearing that they would be called as witnesses to testify against the cruel acts that the Proto did, the girl in the wheelchair got angry, and said that he only punished the fucking bastards he didn't do like Kira. Those people he killed were just a bunch of scum that chased and destroyed countless families. And as he said that, the commander appeared and said she was right, but even if they deserved to die being cut to pieces, it is up to the government to judge them. And when asked why he never did anything against the loan sharks, the commander said that just like the light that comes from the sun, there will always be a darkness that cannot be dispelled by light, so there will always be sacrifices in the world, and her personal revolt is unfair. On hearing this, the girl, filled with anger, said that if even resisting is wrong, then the very existence of this world is a mistake, So after she left, the commander said that despite while anger is normally a sign of incompetence, it can also be a source of strength, and if this young woman's willpower were evaluated, she would be at the top level. So if he had the same anger power back then, everything could be as different. Later when she got home, the girl said that if there are areas in the world where the sun doesn't shine, she must be the light, and there is no need for the sun to exist anymore, and as she said this she managed to get up and walk on her own feet, and seeing her little sister standing, Yan Qian was shocked, but out of nowhere her sister pointed her hand towards her and told her to run away, and as she said that several roots flew from her hand towards her, while at the same time in the Defense Force conference room, it shows the officials discussing the new order they received from the president, where they are going to have to take a third of the defense force out of the city. And as he listened to their discussions, the commander felt the aura of the Great Calamity reborn. Because of that, he ordered his employee to activate the military plan and evacuate all the people of the city, and finishing giving his orders, he jumped from the building towards the monster's aura. At the same time, it shows a journalist saying that the person responsible for the massacre of 3 days ago has been captured, and while this news was going on, people were living their lives as if it were a normal day, and in that it shows a guy marveling at the roses because they are blooming so soon, but then out of nowhere when a bee posed on the rose, several flowers started to grow on her body, and she became a plant, not only the bee. The guy also ended up becoming a humanoid plant, and seeing that a certain extra was terrified, but before he could escape, his body turned into several rose petals, and both these petals and pollen began to turn anyone into a humanoid plant monster, and while people were in despair, a hunter appeared and cut one of the plant monsters. But even though he killed the demon, his arm turned into several roots. At the same time, he realized that this was some kind of infection, and because of this infection much of the city was swallowed up by the roses, and seeing this, one of the commander's employees explained that those who were infected by the Great Calamity were to rot in a heartbeat, but for some reason they weren't rotting, instead they were becoming monsters. On hearing this, the commander gave the order for each of them to protect a street, and to watch carefully and not allow the human flowers to continue spreading, and also to be careful not to come into physical contact with an infected human. So after receiving the order from their boss, they left to carry out their missions, and doing their part the commander used his dragon breath to burn various plant monsters and save the people, and while the citizens were relieved the ash of the humanoid plant touched in the extra's face, and with that he turned into a plant demon. So in just a few minutes a large part of the city was infected, and several people became humanoid plants. And in the midst of this greenish hell, the commander continued giving the orders to his men, where they shouldn't use the bullets of the gun to eliminate the infected. Instead they have to make sure that none of these human flowers escape this area, otherwise Korea would be destroyed. At the same time the director arrived and asked how the Great Calamity managed to reincarnate, and the commander replied that this must be the power of immortality. Only few monsters possess such a thing. Even being reduced to ashes, these monsters still manage to rise, and the immortality of this type of monster was only discovered a few years ago, but immortality is relative, and there is no such thing as eternal immortality. On hearing this the director said that at that time, after of the number one hero to eliminate the Great Calamity, he told government officials to effectively treat the radiation of all people, so as to completely remove all traces left by the Great Calamity. They agreed at the same time, but not long after the ex-hero leaves. Those people didn't do what he told them to. They not only failed to clean up the mess, they also embezzled the money given by the former number one hero to help the infected, so if they had followed his orders from the start none of this would have happened. And getting irritated by this information, the commander asked where the greatest amount of energy of fluctuation was. Why in that place must be the Great Calamity. Upon hearing this, the director was surprised, and said that there is no way for the commander to deal with the Great Calamity alone, since that monster of the rank natural disaster was of the 10th level. But the commander said that he does not feel the presence of any monsters level 9 let alone 10 in this city, and the current state of the Great Calamity is just a newborn life that has mutated. So this is the best time to kill her, as she still hasn't regained her full power. So if they don't destroy it now, they will have to pay a much higher price later. At the Same time the news of the plant monster that infected an entire city spread across the internet, and seeing this people wondered where the number hero was. 1. And they were also suspicious of the media information, as these plant zombies looked a lot like humans, rather than just humanoid plants that were born from the earth. Because of that the media decided to show the commander going to eliminate the Great Calamity. Live this way after easily dodging various routes, the commander met with the host of the Great Calamity, and that host was Yan Qian's sister. And seeing this demon pretending to be a god to make people worship their majestic appearance, the commander explained that some monsters deliberately imitate some religious images, and people worship them. But after many centuries, when humans realized that these monsters were not gods, humanity left their worship blind. At the same time, the commander said he didn't expect that after a few hours without seeing her, she would become a monster. Upon hearing this, the plant mind asked if he regretted it. And he replied that he regrets not having killed her in the wheelchair at that moment, and finishing saying that, he flew towards her like lightning, and took a part of her head off, but it had no effect on her, and her head regenerated, and she said that all this is useless, and so ends Chapter 19. In the previous part, Yan Qian's sister turned into a calamity-level monster, and started turning the townspeople into plant monsters, and to stop her destruction, the commander went alone to the battlefield, and seeing the monster's appearance of calamity level, the commander was surprised to recognize what her identity was. But without wasting time, he ripped off a part of her head, and to his surprise she was a monster that had a high-speed regeneration. Of course, every being that has such a regeneration has a weakness. Because of that he attacked the monster with several lightning strikes to discover its weakness, but this had no effect on her, as she regenerated right away, and to make matters worse, the girl made fun of the skill him. But this was not a mere mockery, he felt an immense danger coming from her, so scared he recoiled like lightning. But even though he used all his speed, the girl appeared behind him, and asked that this was his maximum speed, because if it is, he won't be able to defeat the darkness inside her. And on hearing this, the commander felt a chill on the back of his neck. So without hesitation he tried to distance himself from her with all his speed, but even though he was as fast as lightning, he couldn't get any faster than she, and different from what he imagined, she wasn't being faster than him, she was just changing her location using the plants, and seeing her great power, the director ordered Commander Jiang to retreat soon, because as long as the humanoid flowers are not eradicated, she cannot be killed, so no matter how many times he attacks her, she will not die. And to defeat her they need to launch large weapons scaled to annihilate this entire area. But even knowing that, there was no way for the commander to abandon this city. If he does, he will be dishonoring the medal he won from the number 1 hero, and even deciding to fight to the death. In the girl's view he was just as a cornered animal, so proving that he deserved all the medals he's won, the commander activated his ace up his sleeve. But this transformation taxed his body as it burned all his life force to increase his power in the Mado guy style, and realizing that he was planning to sacrifice himself, the director begged him not to, since even if he manages to survive, after destroying every cell in his body with this transformation, he will turn into a normal person, and to make matters worse he will become a paraplegic. Of course the girl also realized what he was thinking of doing. But to her it made no difference that his power was going to increase from 7 to 8, and seeing him getting ready to attack, the girl said that it was useless. Why, as long as that she transfers her mind, she can move instantly. But unlike what she thought, his fist was faster than her speed of thought. But even though he managed to hurt the monster, the Commander T wasn't happy, as his body was constantly being infected by her poison. But the reason he didn't turn into a plant monster was because the lightning was killing the infection. And that made him feel an endless cycle of pain, and while filming what was happening, the reporter got carried away and thought that the commander had killed the monster. But to spoil his happiness, the director said that the Great Calamity was not killed, the power fluctuation did not disappear, instead this is only increasing, and she is getting stronger. The reason for this is that she is using the tens of thousands of people in the city as her source of power, so in order to defeat her, the commander will have to eliminate all these people, and while explained that, her energy started to rise rapidly, and she became a level 9 natural disaster, and her power kept growing very fast. And seeing this, the director realized that the city of Day had no more salvation. At the same time, it shows the plant girl being surprised at the power the old man got by burning his life force, and because of this new power of hers, she started to feel irritated as she didn't understand why he didn't use this great power to save the innocent like her father. Instead, he let so many people drown in the darkness, and getting even more hysterical, she started to absorb all the plant monsters. And even those that were almost making it out of the red zone retreated towards her. And by absorbing all these plant monsters, she managed to create a giant body bigger than the buildings in the city. And answering her question, the commander said that in this damn world, death is normal, since human life has no importance. Because of that, many lives are sacrificed for the famous greater good, and finishing saying that, he attacked the girl with all his might, but she used only one hand to stop his attack. And to his surprise, the attack of he managed to destroy his arm, and went towards his head, and seeing that, the media started to say that this was a spectacular victory for humanity. Even the citizens who were seeing all this fight live started to think that humanity had won. But unlike what they thought, the girl was far from defeated. Instead, she used her roots to capture the old man, and annoyed by his answer, she told him to go to hell with this damn man. World. When she finished saying that, she crushed the commander with a single hand, and mocked his death, saying that he was too weak a creature to think of defeating her. While seeing this, the director realized that the energy of the commander had disappeared, and with his death, humanity began to wonder when the number 1 hero will appear and defeat that monster. But as he had been expelled from his position, and no one had seen him for a long time, they went into despair. Since they didn't know what to do in this situation without their savior. At the same time, several comments started to appear on the internet, cursing the federal government for having expelled the number 1 hero, and ordering them to solve this situation. So it cuts to another scene, and shows the Prota inside the prison, hearing that a natural disaster level monster has appeared in the city of Day, and also shows the president saying that the hunters keep finding each other, but when it's their turn to sacrifice themselves, they start making excuses. Just like now, they said that since the monster's abilities are weird, they need an hour and a half to get all the people together. But by the time they do, the city of Day will already have been destroyed. And while said that the hunters were a bunch of greedy and cowards, one of the executives said that he shouldn't have been so merciless with the number 1 hero. So now if he wants to stop this monster's advance, he's going to have to entirely destroy the city of Day. And for that there is a final plan that doesn't need the help of hero number 1, and that plan was to use nukes to destroy the monster. And hearing this, the other execs started to agree with that plan, since that the use of such a weapon will sacrifice a small number of people, to save a much larger number. So if the president agrees, they can exterminate that area right now, and with that people will praise him for the great decision. And while he was shocked by their plan, one of their employees said that there was a change in the city of Day, and this change was not the appearance of the hunters. Rather, it was because a humanoid monster appeared in the middle of the city. Guys, we know who this is. Monster he is talking about. Going back to a few minutes earlier, a large hole was made in the exclusive prison of the municipal defense, and inside the prison it shows the guard shocked by the terrifying scene in front of him, and when asked where the special level prisoner was, he said that one guy escaped after causing such damage. Meanwhile, in the city of Day, a part of the soldiers were in mourning for the death of the commander, and the other part was abandoning their mission. But among the soldiers there were those who, even dying of fear, did not abandon their mission and attack the plant monsters. But naturally their sense of duty was not enough to defeat the humanoid plants, and seeing his companion being captured, the other soldier ran towards the monster to save his friend. And the moment he was about to be captured as well, a dark aura passed around him, and cut all the vines in front of him. And thanks to that mysterious attack, the recruit's companion ended up being captured. I was saved, and while the brave soldier was not understanding what just happened, it shows the reporter getting excited with the arrival of support. Of course they didn't miss this great opportunity to increase their audience, and started filming a dark aura cutting everyone the sepos as he went towards the great calamity. And seeing this scene, people were relieved to think that the Federation had not given up on the city, and had sent support. but there were also those who complained about the delay in support. But seeing the appearance of what they thought was their savior, they were shocked, as this hunter looked like a monster too. At the same time, it is explained that the reason why the Prota is in such a place is due to the fact that he received the mission from the system to eliminate the new natural disaster, and as a reward, he will gain the core of the Great Calamity, and sensing the monster's aura. The former hero explains that compared to his past life, the Great Calamity no longer has the aura of decay and destruction. This time the Great Calamity does not symbolize death, but life. Of course, he is talking about the life of the primeval forest, a life of tropical plants, vines and tall trees growing freely, and making everything around of them in their own territory. And regardless of what these plants touch, everything on this planet would transform into the same form of life, so there would be no sadness or pain. All life would sink into this new state of comfort, but of course this would be no different from giving up on living his life, like Naruto's infinite Tsukuyomi. But that didn't matter to him, since his goal was to get to the heart of the Great Calamity, in order to gain more power and thus have enough strength to fight those vacuum beasts in the future. And while he was going towards the monster, the girl was already completely assimilated with the Great Calamity. And in that a new will was born in her being, where she had to make everyone join her. So that a beautiful world without sadness, pain and injustice could be inaugurated. Naturally she could feel that she was no longer the same, since her thoughts changed when she assimilated with these flowers, and these lives that she assimilated, however unequal whatever they were before, they are all the same now, only the joy of living remains in their minds, and soon more people will be able to join her family. But suddenly, to spoil her happiness, she felt a large group of her family disappearing in the south. Naturally she got irritated, and tried to find out which son of a bitch did this. At the same time, the Prota was surprised to find that the girl in the wheelchair had become the recipient of the Great Calamity. Of course, even though she was an acquaintance of his, he didn't think to change his objective, so with his great speed, he went out, easily cutting all the vines in his path. And seeing him heading towards her, the girl realized that this being in front of her was not a person, human, and was surprised by the fact that he is not being assimilated as well, since even monsters are not immune to their assimilation. And with his climb on her arm, she got even more irritated, and tried to crush him, but the Prota cut the monster's hand into little pieces, and went towards her head, but suddenly the humanoid plants were born on her shoulder and attacked him, and even managing to defend himself. His situation did not improve, since humanoid plants were also born behind him. But even being attacked from all sides, he managed to dodge using his great speed, and seeing this great battle, the reporter got excited, since this battle was pumping adrenaline in his brain. And unlike the reporter who didn't understand gravity from this situation, the hunters were scared, since they never imagined that monsters could fight this way, so not wanting to accept reality, they tried to convince themselves that the monster was actually a hunter who was wearing strange armor, since the reason why humans can fight against monsters, and because of the difference in wisdom and intelligence between them. But the genius shown by this monster is beyond belief. Range of even a 9th level professional, so if one day monsters surpass humans in intelligence, the world will be doomed. Returning to the battle, the Prota noticed that he couldn't just dodge, so he activated his second form, and made some demonic wings appear on his body. Thus becoming more fucked up with this new transformation, the Prota flew towards the mine, and seeing this, the audience began to wonder why he took so much risk dodging the explosions before if he could fly. But unlike normal people, the hunters realized that he did all that to catch the monster off guard, and using his katana, the Prota fired a demonic blow towards the head of the Calamity. And while people thought he had managed to defeat the girl, since after his blow, the humanoid flowers stopped moving, out of nowhere in a bizarre way all the plant demons began to ask who the protagonist was. But upon seeing the bloody raven blade in his hand, the girl discovered his identity, and as the two had chosen to become monsters, she asked the question. Proposed for them to make an alliance, since with their strength, they can change this rotten world together. She even offered the Great Calamity core item, which was the reward that the system had also offered to him. In short, she was giving the final reward of the mission directly to him, and said that if there is a darkness in the world that can never be lightened, then they must destroy this world. And even though this proposal is a great temptation, the Prota said that he has no interest in protecting the humanity or cooperating with monsters to destroy the world. Before he was reborn, he was already fed up with these things. Now there is only one thing he wants to do, and that is to kill all the monsters without caring about saving the lives of humans. And for that, he became a monster at the mercy of the system, so all he needs now is strength. An extraordinary power that makes all monsters fall beneath his feet. And as he didn't respond to her proposal, the girl realized that he wasn't interested in destroying the world, and made a bet with him, if he could finish her off, before she destroyed this filthy world. At the same time her head turned into several vines, and they attacked the former hero, and even he managed to defend himself using his wings. She captured him, and seeing her trying to swallow him, the Prota deactivated his gargoyle wings, and instead activated the claws of Dr. Octopus, and with that he managed to destroy the vines. But at the moment next, the girl swallowed him. Of course the Prota was the strongest monster in the universe, so he managed to pierce through her head easily, and since he had defeated at least tens of thousands of giant monsters in his previous life, he knew that to defeat this calamity, he would have to find her true body. So he came to the conclusion that if the core is not in her head, the core is probably in her heart. And to test whether his theory was right, he landed several blows on her, and because of his great speed of attacks, he managed to reach his goal slowly, but in that he had much of his transformation destroyed, and when he finally found the true body of the calamity, he attacked her with all the power he still had, and even having a sword through her body, she didn't show any reaction, and said that she didn't expect him to be able to break a stone with an egg once again, and as the former hero had used all his power in that last attack, he couldn't move his body anymore. But before he fell towards the city, the vines captured him, and the girl said that she realized that he was even hotter than his idol, hero number 1. But now it was too late to realizing that, since she was already killed in his last attack, so now she is using the last of the energy from the great calamity to keep herself in this world for a little while longer. And meanwhile, the reporter was going into despair around foot and saw that the Prota had lost. And suddenly a high-level disaster earthquake occurred in the city of Day, and from the black sky something fell that looked like a meteor, but that was not a meteor, but a nuclear bomb, which the high echelons of the Federation rushed towards the city, and even though they made such a decision, the president regretted it, and seeing the nuclear bomb, the girl was not surprised by their cruelty in sacrificing an entire city. Instead, she decided to do. Everyone saw what kind of bastards the Federation was that betrayed the number 1 hero, so going inside its giant avatar, it started to absorb all the humanoid plants in the city, and it got even bigger. And it turned into a giant tree that covered the entire city, and in the next moment, it collided with the nuclear bomb, and with that a huge explosion occurred that turned the humanoid plants into ashes, and when the impact of the explosion was close to the Prota, the vines protected him, forming a cocoon around him, and even though he was in another city, people could see this terrifying scene, and because of this nuclear bomb, people around the city thought that they would die, but different from what they thought. They didn't suffer any scratches, since the giant tree received all the damage. At the same time, the director saw that the signs of the great calamity had disappeared. Naturally, he was saddened by the death of the commander, but he was also happy that the city that the commander died to defend was safe, and seeing everything that just happened, the citizens were in doubt if the monster had collided with the nuclear missile on purpose. At the same time the big tree turned into rose petals, and seeing this beautiful landscape, a girl, she was delighted and touched the petals even though she was warned that it was dangerous, and different from what the old man thought. Nothing happened to her, and while the whole world celebrated the victory of humanity, the Prota was the girl with the plant in her arms, and while enjoying this beautiful scenery, she said that she never thought that spring could be so beautiful, and those were her last words before she died, and for having completed her mission, the Prota received the core of the monster as a reward. And the core was the heart of the great calamity, which was also the heart of the plant girl, so, without any hesitation, the strongest monster in the universe equipped the core, and used the system function to teleport to another place. And as the calamity of Day City had been defeated, the people who watched the live stream were ecstatic with the victory of humanity. But while everyone was shouting long life to humanity, something bizarre was happening. The humanoid flowers were being transformed back in humans. Most of the crowd watching the broadcast was shocked by what was happening in front of them. But there were some who realized one thing. The humanoid flowers that were killed by the nuclear bomb were all human, and because of this discovery, the humans split. One part sided with the Federation. As for them to sacrifice few humans to save a much larger number, it was the best decision in that situation. But the other part disagreed with the Federation. Why did the humanoid monster that appeared from suddenly had already entered the heart of the great calamity, and all those infected had already stopped moving? So the sacrifice of those lives for the nuclear bomb was not necessary, and there were also those who said that if the former hero had not been betrayed, he would have eliminated the calamity right at the beginning. So in an instant all kinds of opinions were colliding, immediately, whether lives or television, or related discussions on the internet, all disappeared without leaving a trace behind. Simply put, they were censored by the Federation. At the same time in the Federation meeting room, the executives were reporting to the president that although the discussions were temporarily controlled, this situation would not be easy to resolve. Several people already saw what happened, so if they don't give an explanation, they will be in a difficult situation. After all, they had already used public opinion to condemn the number one hero. So there is no way that the citizens will be on their side again. And even hearing all this, the president did not say anything, and seeing how his boss was acting, a certain executive was frustrated, as he knew that this mistake of firing a nuclear bomb was not enough to force the president to give up his position. At the same time, another executive said that he has a very simple solution to solve the problem of the nuclear bomb, and that was to put all the responsibility on top of the number one hero. Since if he had defeated the calamity, they would not have needed to fire the bomb. Nuclear MBA, so those sacrifices could have been completely avoided. And even though the Federation and all of humanity had given an uncountable amount of resources to the number one hero, still, he dared abandon humanity in such a hopeless situation. So just because he didn't care about the death of the people, they ended up with such a tragedy. And everything that happened in Day City is connected to the number one hero. Then that same official said that the president didn't need to worry. He'll take care of everything, even the smallest detail. But the president said he wasn't worried. The problem was that when you get to the root of it all, you would realize that the real problem was that humanity didn't have strong enough firepower. If they had a pawn with 50% of the number one hero's power, it would be enough to face all the problems. And finishing saying that, he asked how there was the preparation for the plan of the rising sun, and the Four Eyes replied that as the experiment 268 succeeded, the plan progresses smoothly. And there are also several bodies that even without activating the new human state, manage to live stably for a long time, although once this state is activated, the bodies can quickly go into a state of collapse. But even then the merging of monsters and humans is completely possible. So if the number one hero is the one who took away the humanity from the brink of extinction, they will be the ones who will lift mankind to heights never reached, and if mankind manages to harness the power of the monsters, they will become gods. It was later explained that the front lines of the battle against monsters is not so much a line, but an area of 1 million square kilometers of vast land. According to the records of the Dark Ages, before mankind became civilized, this map would be a part of Africa, South America and all of Antarctica. But because of the movement of the Earth, in the hundreds of years that humanity was almost completely wiped out. This piece of land also suffered a collision, and in that the tectonic movement, that would usually take millions of years to complete, were compressed into mere hundreds, and before hero number one led an army here, not a trace of human could be seen on the front lines. Monsters that emerged from dungeons were everywhere. The monsters not only lived in cities, but would also constantly attack humans in other areas, so countless people were killed. In addition to the front lines of the battle against the monsters, this piece of land had another name, which is more recognized and feared, the Cradle of Calamity. It was in this place where all the plagues began, and it was only after hero number one appeared that humanity was able to enter this piece of land again. With his unstoppable methods, he oppressed and dominated the land of demons, until it became the front line between humans and monsters, and the rapid evolution of humanity was due to that man who had powers of a god, the number one hero. Then it shows 4 guys in front of a portal waiting for Captain Jiang, and deciding which one would give that sad news to the captain. But before being able to decide which one would be the unlucky one, they saw the captain going through the portal, and in that one of the hunters explained that the final boss of the dungeon was a level 7 demon, and she who is at the same level surprisingly managed to complete the dungeon alone in half an hour, and because of that great power of hers she is called a genius, and she was also quite beautiful, and seeing the strange expressions of her subordinates, the captain asked why they had such an ass face, and the hunter replied that a natural disaster-level monster appeared in Day City, and hearing that, she was worried. Instead she asked that everything had already been resolved, and the hunter replied that they had already dealt with the monster, but her father, Commander Jiang, sacrificed himself in the fight. His sacrifice was magnificent, and was it not a disgrace to his position as commander of the city? But contrary to the reaction they expected, the captain didn't seem to mind this sad news, and called them to the next dungeon, and being surprised by their reaction, they followed her. While wondering if she's really okay with it, they know that even though she has the ability to control lightning, she has the nickname of Immobile Ice. But even so they find it difficult for her not to feel anything about her father's death, and hearing them gossiping, the captain said that if they keep wasting time with gossip, she will transfer them to the atonement camp, and since they didn't want to go there, they apologized without thinking twice. At the same time it is explained that the speed at which dungeons form on the front lines is much higher than anywhere else in the world. It is only because of the high speed of work by the Jiangling team that the number of dungeons continuously formed once controlled, the stronger a team is, the more dungeons they need to clear. Seeing the captain entering the portal, the hunter asked if she needs everyone to enter this dungeon this time, since it's been a while since they've entered the dungeon with her. At this rate they'll become a group of cheerleaders, and listening to what her subordinates said, the captain said that it can be assumed that her subordinates have a very low opinion of her, and while the hunter apologized, he saw the captain entering the dungeon alone again, and after her departure, the hunters started to say that her aura is terrifying, similar to that of a high-level monster. Naturally they can't breathe properly when they are near her, and only someone with spirit as strong as the captain's would be able to face that kind of reality at such a young age. But the downside is that she seems like an emotionless monster who doesn't know pain. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the captain ended up seeing a shocking scene, and because of this scene with dozens of monsters massacred, she thought that some other incredibly strong team entered this dungeon before her. But of course we know that the culprit of this was the protagonist. But when analyzing the injuries of these monsters, she changed her mind, since it was as if all these wounds were inflicted by the same weapon. In short, a hunter entered this dungeon alone, just like her, and while thinking about it, she felt the aura of a battle happening near her, so to quench her curiosity, she went towards the battle, and getting there, she saw several monsters attacking a low-level hunter. But even this person had a low level, she had excellent combat skills, and analyzing the fight, she noticed that that guy had suffered fatal injuries, and his skills were seriously affected. Normally a normal person with at his level, she would have already been killed by those monsters. Still, this guy managed to depend on his skills and endure even in this kind of situation. But if things continued like this guy would die. Because of that she decided to help, and used her great speed to defeat the 3 monsters quickly, and finishing eliminating them, she asked which team the Proto was on, and also why he entered that dungeon alone. But instead of answering her, the hunter ended up fainting, and seeing this, the captain was disappointed, as she thought he was someone she could respect. She didn't expect him to be just another dead weight. The reason she was saying that was because now she would have to fight a lot of monsters at the same time while protecting him. Of course, even though this was something troublesome, she could still easily resolve this situation. So using her anger, despair and grief, she activated all her power, and went after the monsters, with the aim of unloading all these emotions while slaughtering the monsters. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the hunters wondered why the captain was taking a while. This is a dungeon that doesn't require a high level of skill. The only conclusion they came to was that even though they didn't show it, the commander's death shook her. So now she must be taking her anger out on the monsters. They also said that admired the commander's courage, but if they had the power he had, they still wouldn't have faced the natural disaster, they would have fled. At the same time as saying that, the captain finally left the dungeon, but to their surprise she was carrying a person. At first they suspected that he was a monster pretending to be a human, but as the captain had denied this, they discarded this idea and took the stranger to the M camp. Soldier number 5, who was on the front lines of the battle against the monsters. On the vast land area of the front lines, there are countless camps like this. Each camp is home to only a few thousand people. In each camp at least a quarter of the residents are hunters, and everyone else has war-related responsibilities. Although it is having said that hunters have completely assimilated into the human lifespan, there aren't enough healer hunters to attack the dungeons. So the job of healing the sick and saving lives is still the responsibility of fully trained human doctors. And one of those doctors was surprised at the fact that the Prota is alive, since most hunters do not survive with these injuries. But his healing ability only allowed him to recover a lot in the short time he was brought to this camp, and even seeing many hunters, the doctor never seen someone with this kind of healing ability. His regeneration power is frightening to the point of comparing to a high-level monster. At the same time the doctor explains that there is something else that was bothering him, and that was the fact that the patient's body had a certain amount of nuclear radiation, and as for the burns on his face, they were also caused by the radiation, but with the patient's enormous healing ability along with the hospital's care, the doctor believes he can be discharged quickly, and if the captain wants, the hospital can even heal the scars on his face. And while she agreed to leave the hunter in the care, the doctor, the supreme commander of Military Camp No. 3, said that there was no need to leave him in the hospital. Then in Military Camp No. 3, it shows the captain and the supreme commander in the infirmary, listening to the report of the disaster that happened in the city of Day, and also the names of the hunters who died in that disaster, and hearing the name of the captain's father, the old man said that he died as a hero. Dying in battle is the best end for people like them, in the end. There will be a day when both he and she will die in battle for the peace of this land, the supreme commander also said that the media of the Star City wanted an interview with her, but he rejected them, and upon receiving her thanks, he said that her father's choice that year was not wrong. If it was him, or even her as he is now, they would have done the same choice, so there's no reason to blame herself anymore. After all, her fault was just her fighting herself, and finishing saying that, the Supreme Commander went towards the exit. But before leaving, he said that she should pay attention in that hunter, since someone who paid the way to control this sword is very interesting. Upon hearing this, the captain started asking several questions about the Prota, but the Supreme Commander left without answering her questions, and while waiting for the hunter to wake up to understand what his identity was, suddenly he opened his eyes, and looked at her with a menacing gaze, and feeling this terrifying aura emanating from him. The captain prepared for combat, and was shocked to feel so threatened by someone for the first time, but in the next moment the terrifying aura disappeared, and he said that she could already take the serum, and even without asking questions, the Prota knew that he was in some military camp. He could recognize this scenario easily, since he had lived most of his life on the line of ahead, and understanding that it was this mine in front of him that brought him to this place. He asked what her name was, and the captain replied that it was Jingling. So, after they introduced themselves, the Prota saw the reporter bought by the Federation throwing all the blame on him, saying that it was for the number 1 hero to have been the first to appear to fight against the great calamity. That was the only way for him to repay humanity for everything the Federation did for him. But at the same time instead, he turned his back on humanity. Of course the captain realized that the Federation executives were anxious, as they would shift the blame onto someone else in such a crude way, and finding this situation frustrating, she said that the hero most strong must be very tough. When he is present, all problems can be thrown to him to solve, and when he is not there, he is responsible for everything that happens in the world. Although she does not know his identity, he seems to be a person amazing, and finishing saying that, the captain changed the subject, and said that as long as he doesn't do anything that puts the military camp in danger, he can leave after his wounds heal, but if he dares to threaten set up camp, she will break every one of his bones. Naturally, the Prota made fun of her, saying that she could never do that, as she can't even defeat him. Of course, like anyone with the position of captain, she got annoyed, and said that she can't wait for the day to fight him, but for now, she doesn't have any more time to spend with him. She needs to clear the next dungeon. After meeting with her group, they began to ask her several questions about the Prot, but she didn't know the answer to their questions. The only thing she knew was his name, and upon hearing the Prot's name, the hunters were under the impression that they had already heard that name somewhere. They also realized that the captain was about to explode. At the same time, they saw the strange hunter leaving the infirmary, and asked where he was going in this state, and the Prota replied who was going to the dungeon. The reason for this was that his heart is linking with the great calamity, and because of that heart, his body is thirsty for lives. He needs to kill some monsters, in order to absorb their vital energy, and using it to treat his wounds. And seeing him going to the dungeon, the hunters gave up on stopping him, as it would be good for them if someone helped deal with the dungeons. And while he was in the dilemma of going after him, the superior commander Remo appeared, and they explained the situation to him, and in that the middle-aged guy gave the order for half of them to follow the captain and the other half to follow this young man, and even though they didn't want to do that, they had no choice but to not accept. Later, when they finally managed to reach the captain, they explained the situation to her, and said that the Supreme Commander not only let that stranger go in the dungeon in that state, but also selected some people from his team to go clean the dungeon with that guy. It was the first time they saw the commander in such a good mood, so he must have some kind of relationship with the commander. And listening to all this, the captain noticed that the Prota had his own intentions to go clean a dungeon right after waking up. Meanwhile, her companions were filling the Prota with information about her, without even asking him, saying that the captain has a natural affinity with lightning. This is a specialty passed down from her family. They even revealed that she was the daughter of the Jinag commander who sacrificed herself in Day City. Naturally, having a father like that, she was born with great talent, and became a professional hunter at the age of 12, and rose directly to the 3rd rank at 13, and in that she became the sole student of the Supreme Commander. And finishing this egg drooling, they asked if the Prota had any connection with the Supreme Commander, since it didn't make sense for the elder to give this equipment to a stranger, and even break the rules just to let him clear a dungeon. And the Prota replied that there is no connection, and at this these parrots began to explain that the Supreme Commander is a living legend. He seems blind, but they say that his vision is even sharper than that of normal people. Just by the aroma and sound waves, he can see his surroundings clearly in the dark, like a bat. The power of the Supreme Commander is officially 8th rank, but it is said that he has already reached the 9th rank. He can already go to the Star City meetings. Such a powerful person is willing to be stationed in their camp. It is a great honor for them. The parrots also spoke that the Supreme Commander fought side by side with the number 1 hero on the front line. He did part of the legendary group, Monster Dispersal Army. From the beginning he fought alongside the hero in this army, and being forced to listen to all this egg drool, the Prota remembered this group they were talking about. At the same time, he explains that in the beginning, when no one had a good impression of him, he led 3,000 people and stepped on the front lines in battle. At the time, it had been a long time since humans had set foot on this piece of land, and there was a habitable area here for a long time. The earth, the sky, the underground, the water, countless monsters flowed like water, attacking the monster-scattering army. In the end, under everyone's pessimistic gaze, the army proved with its own blood that mankind really was able to stand firm on this piece of land, and the army soldiers who managed to survive luckily grew up to become powerful hunters. They were like a sky full of fire spread across this land, building bases that grew to small towns. After that, they gathered more people, until they became the camp of today, and thus, the front lines of the battle against the monsters was born. After this long explanation, the protagonist finally arrived in front of the portal, and for having spent some time talking like a parakeet, the extras began to trust the protagonist, even though he had been silent the whole time, and prepared to enter the dungeon with him. But the Prota said that he doesn't need help, he'll be fine alone, and after saying that, he finally entered the portal, and was much more comfortable with the smell of monsters, as he preferred to stay inside the dungeons. than in the outside, because in that kind of place, he can lose all control, and bathe in the blood of demons.